Buddy, Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Beat live podcast following day one of Patriots mandatory minicamp. And Alex, we were both out there bearing the elements today. Very rainy. I am dry. I changed, so that helped. But it was soaking wet out there, torrential downpour, a lot of sloppy football at times, incomplete passes, drops by the receivers. We're going to get into everything about Stephon Gilmore and that saga, but I wanted to start with observations and specifically about the quarterback position, Alex. I've been a little bit reluctant, for those that have watched our OTA observation pods, after the 3 OTA practices that were open to the media, to crown Mac Jones, right? Like I've said, He hasn't really made many downfield throws yet. There are some inklings, I can see it, but I haven't truly seen it yet. Today was the first day where it moved a little bit to me, right? Like I was like, okay, now we're starting to see him not only understand conceptually what's going on the field for the Pats in terms of what route combinations they're running or what they're doing against a certain look defensively, but now we're starting to see him actually push the ball down the field. He started in 11-on-11s with a back shoulder throw to Jacoby Myers, which I thought was, at the time, his best throw that he's made in the team drill so far. But I thought the true best throw that he made out there today was a crossing route to Christian Wilkinson, where he read the post route, taking the defense over the top. The post safety took Isaiah Zuber deep. He got to the intermediate level. He threw it in between a couple of defenders. An NFL throw, right? Where you said, okay, if that translates directly into a game. So for the first time, I would say in the 3 OTA practices today at minicamp, I finally saw what I wanted to see out of Mac Jones. So that, I think, is where everybody should start, even though a lot of the conversations are going to be about Gilmore or Cam's hand and things like that. Seeing Mac Jones finally go out there, push the ball down the field, make some completions down the field, and put the ball decisively, confidently where he wanted it to be against the coverage. I thought today was Mac's best day so far.
Yeah, I think, it's about progress, right? And it's not so much that he's coming out and he's making these great plays. He's making plays he wasn't making last week, 2 weeks ago, right? And that's what you want at this time of the year. Now, if that's as far as he's gotten when we get to the end of August, it's going to be a red flag, but he's getting better. And he said last week, and I wrote about this for 98.5 thesportshub.com with his 2 bucket thing, right? He has 2 buckets. One's the thing he knows, one's the things he doesn't know, and it's just about moving things from one bucket to the other. And you can tell he's starting to put the pieces together, and the things he's learning, the things he's seeing on film, what he's getting from the coaching staff, it's starting to translate on the field. It's not totally there yet. He's still got some work to do, but at this time of year, progress is as much as you can ask for. Progress is the biggest thing, and he made progress today, so that's exciting.
Yeah, so the throw to Wilkerson was the one that really stood out to me, because I don't know if he makes that throw a week ago, right? Because it was open, but it was NFL open. It wasn't Alabama open, right? It wasn't like there was some giant passing lane for him to fit the ball into there, and he made the read. He came off the snap. He saw the post safety taking Isaiah Zuber deep. He knew that the crossing route was then his decision, and that was where the ball should go, and he confidently and decisively drilled a throw in there, and that's exactly what you want to see. And then I don't know if it was necessarily as live of a rep as as the rest of the reps, but the throw to Gunnar Olszewski up the seam was nice.
That was a nice throw. Nice throw.
Yeah, he split the safeties. That one, it looked a little bit like they were going maybe 50% instead of 75% in terms of what the defense was doing. And then he came back at the end of practice in that 2-minute drill sequence that they were doing, and he got them into field goal range and set up the field goal for them to hit the game winner. And he made that nice throw again to Gunnar on a deep in cut to kind of get that drive started. And you talk about those 2-minute drives when you want to get into field goal range, and that's the goal. The first drive starting throw, right? That 1st and 10 throw is often the hardest one, right? Is getting that first chunk, right? Where does that come from? And he got it right away. And to me, all the other stuff that we've heard about Mac Jones has been a little bit premature. And today, for the first time, like I said at the beginning, he finally started to push the football down the field. He finally started to take some of the throws that were there that might not be Alabama open. Like I said, they were more NFL type passing windows. And like you said, we're starting to see it translate, right? We're starting to see him start to stack things together and start to grasp things together. And if he continues on this sort of trajectory, he's still got a ways to go, like you said, but we're here in June. If he's continues to stack good practice after good practice, and Bill Belichick mentioned today that the rookie program doesn't end on Wednesday, right? The veterans go away for a month or so. The rookies continue. If he continues to stack these good days together, then by the end of training camp, I think he's going to be at a pretty good place.
Yeah, so a couple things there. I think you mentioned the 2-minute drill at the end. I thought those were probably as live reps, and they weren't anything super strenuous, but I would say that's as live as we've seen the team so far this spring. I think there was more juice to that than anything else they've done. I thought he looked very comfortable. You mentioned the 1st and 10 throw. There was a 3rd and 2 throw he made where the defense kind of gave him a weird look, and it's a spot where a rookie quarterback maybe takes a chance, right? You think, okay, it's 3rd and 2. The defense knows that we need this first, so they're going to creep up, and I'm going to take the shot down the field. He didn't take the bait. He checked it right down to J.J. Taylor, got the first down, out of bounds, kept it going. I thought he looked very, very comfortable in the 2-minute drill. There was one other throw. It might have also been in the 2-minute. It was when they were in on the backfield doing 11 on 11. And it's not that it was that spectacular of a throw, right? He hit, I think it was Hunter Henry. He hit one of the tight ends on like a 7-yard in route, and whoop-de-doo. But last time we were out there on Thursday, very similar route, very similar coverage. He nearly threw a pick. Kyle Van Noy dropped what would have been an interception. This time around, I thought he just waited another like quarter of a second for that tight end to get across where the linebacker wasn't Van Noy this time, but whoever the linebacker was, he waited for that linebacker to get across, and then he made the throw. And it's just learning how those windows develop at the NFL level. So again, not a highlight throw at all. Not like he's putting his arm talent on display, but that's what I'm looking for. It's okay. He made a mistake last time. Let me see how he reacts in the same situation. Cause this is something the Patriots preach. And also, by the way, it's good general life advice if you want to, pull out a pen and a piece of paper here. Yeah. Everybody makes mistakes. Mistakes happen.
Don't make them twice,
right? Yeah. As long as you learn from the mistake, you're fine. That's what the Patriots want to see. They get players make mistakes. It's if you start making the same mistake over and over and over that there's a problem. So he made the mistake last week. It sucks. You don't want to see it, but it happens. He came back this week. He adjusted. He made the change. He completed the pass. That's what you want to see in a nutshell for Mac Jones between now and the end of the preseason.
I think that's well said, because that's really what I saw was that, okay, look, it wasn't like he was going out there and throwing 80-yard bombs and we're all like hooting and hollering and everybody's like putting together this highlight reel of Mac Jones, but it was just the progress, because we saw him a couple weeks ago when OTA started, the very first OTA practice. Everybody is saying, oh, Mac Jones is going to push Cam Newton right away. This is impressive. I'm like, they attempted 4 passes the entire practice, right? He attempted 4 passes in team drills the entire practice. We're basing this off of walkthroughs and passes against air and things like that. And then finally today, I felt like we could sink our teeth into some of these passes that he was making, and he wasn't just checking it down all the time. And he was actually seeing those plays develop down the field. So all of that I thought was really positive for the Patriots. Cam Newton was also out there. Didn't look like his hand bothered him all that much out there today. I think he was throwing the ball just as much as you could possibly expect. But the next place I wanted to take it, because I don't really know what more there is to say about Cam. Cam looks like Cam, right? Like he looks like himself. Hey, the hand injury wasn't a factor. He made a couple of nice throws. One was on a corner route to Hunter Henry, which I thought was a nice pass between J.C. Jackson and Devin McCourty. Do you have any real Cam opinions here? Because to me, it was Cam looks like Cam, right? Which is not to say that's a bad thing. He just looks like Cam Newton.
I didn't think there was any lingering issues from the hand, which is what we were watching today. Yeah. He was erratic at times. I know there's like a video going around where him and Mac are throwing back and forth, and he said Mac's setting the throws, Cam isn't, same throws. That's probably not accurate. He was erratic, but every quarterback was erratic at times today, and the rain was just unbearable. So
yeah,
we'll have to see. I think it's supposed to rain again tomorrow. So we'll see on Wednesday when it's dry, like what his hand really looks like. But I wouldn't put his accuracy issues today, I wouldn't put that on his hand. I'd put that on the conditions, and every quarterback struggled with it.
Yeah, the thing to me is like when we get into these OTA practices and these minicamp practices, I'm more concerned about process than results, right? So like, and I'm not calling anybody out, but a lot of the time we get into these minicamp practices or training camp practices and everybody's like, okay, Cam Newton went 12 of 20 today, right? And that's not very good, right? Especially in these types of practices. But really the question that I'm looking for is not necessarily did the receiver catch the football? Did it go for a touchdown? Did it go for a big play? But did he make the right decision with it? Did he put the ball in a competitive spot? And could it have worked out, right? Was the process good? Because good process leads to good results eventually, but you can have bad process and get lucky on the results, right? So you want to consistently see good process. And I thought that the quarterbacks, despite the conditions, for the most part, had good process. And there was just sort of a lot of drops. There was a lot of wonky balls going into the ground at times because they slipped out of people's hands and stuff like that. Nelson Aguilar in particular, I thought had a pretty tough time with the weather. He had a few drops on some deep balls that he probably would have caught if it wasn't monsooning out, right? But the next place I wanted to take it was, and before we're going to get into Stephon Gilmore here in a second, the cornerback position, I see a lot of comments about that. I want to talk about the two tight ends because we have not seen the tight end duo together, right? We haven't seen Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry on a Patriot practice field together yet until today. And Jonnu Smith did have to tap out of practice early. I saw him slip a little bit on a cut on the top of the route. Maybe that was where he tweaked his hamstring, and that's what people are saying was sort of a hamstring thing. I doubt it's anything serious. Didn't look like it was anything serious. But right off the bat, Josh McDaniels is throwing 12 personnel out on the field, right? Like you got Jonnu Smith and you get Hunter Henry in the building, and right away we're seeing the two tight end sets. It wasn't like anything happened in particular where I was like, "Ooh, wow, that's so cool," or "That was a great play," or something like that. But just seeing it come together like that and seeing that they instantly, day one of minicamp, we're putting the two tight ends out there together and we're going to do all sorts of different things. And then at times, Devin Asiasi was getting in there as well. So it's going to be a tight end party in New England.
Yeah. I thought those two guys were getting their fair share of the targets, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. You know, they were ball magnets. All four of the quarterbacks seem to be focusing heavily on them, and hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But especially early in practice, it felt like when they were doing 7s, when they were doing 11s, more often than not, it was a tight end coming down with it. And Devin Asiasi, like you mentioned, I thought he had another really good day. He's stacking the days. He caught a beautiful back shoulder pass right up the seam about 20 yards. I think it was from Mack. Is from Mack or Stidham. You know, we just put it right on the back shoulder. Asiasi, he doesn't turn too quickly, so the defensive back doesn't realize. He gets up at the right point, high points the ball, turns around, protects it. I thought he was spring. Yeah, the Asiasi, Matt Lacoste too. We've talked about him a little bit. These other tight ends have answered to these two guys being brought in, and we'll see what ultimately happens with it. If they carry a bunch of tight ends, maybe they only carry 4 wide receivers, or if some of these guys get their trade value up where the Patriots can get something for them, a top 200 pick even. But yeah, the tight ends are showing up in a big way. And it starts with those two guys they signed, who again had really strong days today, but everybody's kind of elevated their game.
Devin Asiasi's had a great spring, and I'm an Asiasi fan club. I've always liked Asiasi, so I know I'm going to get some of that. But Asiasi has had a really nice spring. Mike Reese pointed it out in his Sunday notes, and I thought he was spot on with it. He had the catch of the day maybe in OTAs last week from Brian Hoyer up the seam. I agree that was a nice catch he had today on that back shoulder seam, like a seam fade, basically back shoulder up the seam. And he's looked nice, and you put him together. And look, I love the Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith signings, but especially Henry has had some durability issues right in the past. So there might be some managing there. There might need to be some games off there potentially. So it's really nice to have a guy like Devin Asiasi, who I think can step in smoothly and just take over that role, right? And maybe not play it as well as Hunter Henry can, but certainly be serviceable there. And it was sort of coming on for him last season as well towards the end. So I think we're carrying that over into this season. But yeah, I just thought it was really cool. It's not necessarily that there was like one big catch or one play that we can talk about. We can't really talk about formations, unfortunately. There were some kind of creative formations that I saw with Johnny Smith sort of playing off the line of scrimmage, which I think is going to be pretty creative. But it was kind of like Josh McDaniels was already in his bag a little bit with both tight ends. And that's good to see. Right, because we're only in June, right, and he's already rolling out these two guys and has ideas and knows how he's going to use them together. And that sort of core of Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, and Jacoby Myers has kind of separated itself from the pack a little bit already, I would say. And I wrote today, I'd be pretty surprised, those three wideouts, Myers, Bourne, and Aguilar, I'd be pretty surprised if that's not the top three week one, right? Unless there's an injury, obviously. It feels like that group has kind of separated itself from everybody else.
Yeah, it's pretty thorough. I'd agree with all that.
Let's move on to Stephon Gilmore. I didn't want to lead the show with this just because I thought that the Max stuff was really interesting, but certainly I think we can all see that this is a contract dispute at this point, Alex. He did have the partially torn quad issue, but I don't think that that's what's going on here. Karen Garigian reported that this is contract related. Frankly, Stephon Gilmore is not going to play for the Patriots for $7.3 million this year. It's half his going rate. It's sort of unfair of it. You kind of understand, right? I wouldn't say unfair. Guy's a millionaire, but you sort of understand why he doesn't want to play at that number, right? So the Patriots, though, I think the bigger storyline about all of this, and because I do think there is a resolution between the two sides for Gilmore and the Patriots. They have talked about contract extensions with Stephon Gilmore, but the Patriots are wary, as they have been in the past with Talib and Revis and Samuel and Ty Law, of paying that cornerback over the age of 30 a big price tag. But they have talked extension. We've talked about this a ton, but what we're seeing is what life without Stephon Gilmore might look like in the Patriots secondary right now. And it might mean a whole lot of Jalen Mills at outside corner, or maybe Michael Jackson Sr. carves out a role for himself as an outside corner. If there is no Stephon Gilmore, that feels like a hole to me still, or a potential weak spot, I guess I should say.
Even if there is Stephon Gilmore, I still think outside corner is a weak spot. I've done this rant. I'm doing this once a week now.
Yeah.
Jason McCourty played, the two spots I keep looking at, outside corner and deep safety. Jason McCourty played 66% of the defensive snaps last year. He's gone. That's a lot of snaps to replace. And some people will say, I know, so you're in the camp, right? Of, you play Kyle Duggar deep. Kyle Duggar played how many snaps last year? Then you have to replace those snaps. And all of a sudden you're chasing all these replacements, and maybe they're better suited to replace Kyle Duggar's snaps, but they're not very deep in the secondary. They're not. Outside of slot corner and box safety, outside corner, deep safety, and those are important positions. It's something to watch, and Gilmore's absence only compounds it. I don't think that Gilmore comes back and these issues are solved. They're much, much, much better off once Stephon Gilmore is back in the building, of course. But they still need an outside corner. Even if he's in the building, I still think they need an outside corner.
Yeah, so I'm just pulling up right now on Spot Track, just sort of the cornerback, the top contracts for cornerbacks, right? And their AAVs. So Jalen Ramsey's only 25 years old. So I think that that's not exactly the greatest comp for somebody like Stephon Gilmore, because he's 5 years younger than Stephon Gilmore. But Darius Slay is 29, right? I think that's a little bit closer. Okay, Darius Slay is set to make on AAV, this is not what he's making this year in total cash, but just on an average annual value of $16.7 million in his last contract. Stephon Gilmore is...
When did he... And he signed that contract last year.
Yeah, he signed that contract last year.
29, like... You got to go by not their age now, but when they signed it.
Yeah, so I think that's just sort of the closest comp. It's tough because Stephon Gilmore is such a great player.
Much better player than Darius Slay.
Yeah, and I think he's a little bit better player than somebody like a Joe Hayden, for example, right? Who's 30, just signed his contract in 2019, is 30 years old, is making $11.2 million per year. all these contracts are significantly more money than what Stephon Gilmore is making in 2021. And I understand that some people look at it and say, okay, well, the Patriots paid Stephon Gilmore in years 1 through 4. Right. So this is sort of like the comeuppance, right? This is sort of the end of the deal. And the Patriots front loaded a lot of this deal. So that's exactly why Stephon Gilmore is not making as much. But Stephon Gilmore is going to hold out and continue to hold out until the Patriots incentivize him to take the field. And if the Patriots don't do that, then they are going to have a divorce. And we've sort of been down this crossroads for a long time. You know, this kind of started, I would say, more like towards like the right after his Defensive Player of the Year season, right? In 2019 is sort of when these murmurings started about Stephon Gilmore being unhappy about his contract. And they incentivized him by giving him a salary advance last year to get him into camp. And then this year he's holding out because he's well below market value. I think the tough thing is he's still a very good player, but what is his true market value? You know, what do you pay a 30, 31-year-old cornerback? You know, what are you comfortable paying a 30, 31-year-old cornerback? So that's like where I wanted to bring the conversation. And then we can go back to some of the things that we saw out today in terms of replacing Stephon Gilmore and the depth there and stuff like that. But are you comfortable with giving him $16 million a year to incentivize him to stay and incentivize him to show up?
Well, I'm comfortable getting, so that's half the question. I think the AAV, I almost think the AAV isn't the problem because I don't think it's going to be anything too astronomical and the Patriots have space. The issue to me is the years. Yeah. Because I think it was up to the Patriots. They'd up his pay this year. They'd tack one more year on next year and then maybe have some void years, whatever. But I think they'd essentially like to give him a raise this year, pay him next year, and then be done with him at 31. The thing is, he's not going to make a lot of money at 31 on the open market, not like he would right now. So he wants the long-term deal. He's chasing that last big contract.
That Revis contract from the Jets or the Talib contract from the Broncos, you know, those types of contracts.
Right. So that's where there's this weird in between. The reason I'm like half talking is I'm trying to pull this up right now. I don't know how many corners over the age of 30 there were in football last year. I don't think it was a ton.
No, it's not. It's not a long list. And guys, like a lot of really good corners tend to tail off at that time, right? You know, I think Richard Sherman was right around 30. Darrelle Revis was right around that age. And Darrelle Revis retired shortly after turning 30, right? He was somebody that retired a little bit early, but not really with the way that cornerbacks work because everything about cornerbacks is speed, right?
So,
it's all that matters.
So here we go. Corners who are over the age of 30 who played at least 8 games last year. 19 guys. 19 guys, and some of these are special teams players, right? Darryl Roberts, former Patriot. I don't think Darryl Roberts plays a ton of safety, does he? I think he's mostly a special teams guy. Oh, no, he played plenty of defense last year. But, okay, so, you know, you're looking at Jonathan Joseph, Jason McCourty, Josh Norman, Jimmy Smith, Joe Hayden, Dre Kirkpatrick, Malcolm Butler, Patrick Peterson, Xavier Rhodes. These aren't guys who are number one corners. There's really no. I guess Joe Hayden's still kind of a number one corner.
Yeah,
I guess
Steelers fans would be honest for not saying that Joe Hayden's solid. You know, he's a solid player, right? So, but he's not Stephon Gilmore.
So and Jonathan Joseph isn't really a number one anymore. I guess what did Patrick Peterson just sign for?
Not a lot. That was also a little bit of a. I don't know if he's still on his last contract with Arizona.
He was a free agent. He's in Minnesota. He's signed for $8 million.
Right, which is just a little bit more than what Stephon Gilmore is making right now. But if the Patriots did nothing to his contract.
So this is. I mean, I'll bump this down to age 29 here real quick, but I don't think. There is a true comp, and the original reason I pulled this out, right? 19 guys past the age of 30, where Stephon Gilmore's at right now, and then you only have 10 guys over the age of 31. So this is where the issue is to me. And by the way, it's 29 guys over the age of 29, and there really aren't any number ones here either. Darius Slay would be the one exception. So this is why. So again, Gilmore's 30, right? Or is he 31?
He's 30, going to be 31.
31. He'll be 31 when this. He'll turn 31 when the season starts. So only 10 cornerbacks last year over the age of 31. Only 6 over the age of 32, 4 over the age of 33, and then Jonathan Joseph was 36. So this is where the issue comes from, is this guy wants a long-term deal. The numbers show us he doesn't have like that. That's not there. He's not going to be good long-term. He might be productive, but he's not going to be a 15, 16, $17 million player beyond this year and maybe next year. That's what history shows us. So that to me is the issue. That to me is the hang up. It's not the AAV. You start with the years and then the AAV comes from that.
Right. I totally agree with that. I feel like the deal to be had here for the Patriots and Stephon Gilmore is some short-term contract extension, right? Where
I don't think Gilmore wants that. I think the last thing he wants is short-term.
Right. Well, I think he's got to be realistic, because to me, like you said, I don't think he's going to get the money that he thinks he's going to get. Now, maybe he will get one team to overpay him, because all it takes is one team. Right. So maybe he could get one team to overpay him. But to me, staying here in New England in a system that has made him the defensive player of the year and an all-pro player makes more sense than going elsewhere. And I just feel like if the deal to be had is like making him this year, maybe you add on 2 more years, right? And this year you give him a little bit of a salary bonus, signing bonus, with the new contract. That's what incentivizes him to come on, get on the field year. And then 2022 and 2023, you're paying him, between 14 and $16 million, right? I think, and obviously not all that's guaranteed, and there'll probably be outs for the team and stuff like that to protect them. I feel like that's sort of the way to go, because what I wanted to circle back to was what we've seen out at practice is, again, sort of shedding light on the situation of what this would look like if Stephon Gilmore wasn't in the Patriots secondary and Jalen Mills struggled at outside cornerback for the Eagles. I think he's been a little bit shaky at outside cornerback in the practices that we've seen. Juwan Williams is kind of MIA. I don't really know what's going on with Juwan Williams. Michael Jackson Sr. is kind of a nice story. Maybe they found something there, but if you're going into week 1 against Miami in September, going up against Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle, and your 2 corners are J.C. Jackson and Michael Jackson Sr., I don't know how you could feel good about that.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's tough, and they have to figure out a way to get it done. But I just don't. It's the last big contract for Stephon Gilmore, and like you said, maybe he finds a team that overpays him. And you were talking about, it makes more sense for him to stay here. He gets to play in this system where he won Defensive Player of the Year, and you're not wrong with that. But I think if a team's going to trade for him, the idea is it's coming with a contract extension. And if he knows he can get traded to Team X and they're going to give him a 4-year extension, right? I think that's ultimately what he wants. He wants 4 or 5 years. He take a little less money per year, but he wants that big payday, the overall money in the contract one more time. Because at the end of the day, 4 years at $15 million per, right, or 4 years at $12 million per is going to be more than, say, like 2 years at $20 per. Right? Yeah. So I think he's looking at the total money, and the way you get that total money up there is the length of the contract. So again, I think they can incentivize him to try to come in, and maybe there is a way to do it, but it's going to cost them a lot of money. And you mentioned adding 2 years. That 3rd year, just based on the way corners have traditionally fall off based on age, and this is a guy who's coming off an injury, it's going to be really hard for the Patriots, the way they operate, to justify paying him what it would take to pay him in 2023 to make that a 2-year extension.
So I guess the question is, because it does feel like this is going to be pretty difficult to figure out unless the Patriots just give Stephon Gilmore a bonus, put it on top of what he's making this year, increasing his salary from $7.3 million to 11 or 12 million this year, and then let him hit free agency. The Patriots could do that. It would take up the cap space immediately, but they have the cap space to just give them some extra cash. They literally can just hand them an extra $5 million and be fine. If they don't do that, and this goes down the path of trade, do you feel good about anything that you've seen, whether it's out of Jalen Mills or it's out of Michael Jackson Sr., where's your panic meter, for that second outside cornerback spot? And have you liked anything out of any of those guys?
Right. So I'll kind of answer that in a roundabout way. If I'm trading Stephon Gilmore, I don't know that I trade him for a pick. I'm looking for a young cornerback. I want a guy who's played in the league. I don't want to have to draft my own corner. I'm looking for a team that thinks they can win now, that has a corner that they can't wait to develop, a guy who's a year or two away. This is a very difficult trade. This is really more so how trades work in baseball. You don't see football teams make these kind of trades because there is no minor league system. There is no, outside of quarterback, guys don't really wait who have that kind of talent. They come right in. Or if it's not a corner, I'm looking for a safety, or I'm looking for a pass rusher, just somebody who's going to make my team better right away where I can absorb that loss. If you can get a first round pick, sure, but I would almost rather have a second round caliber player, a guy who's going to come in right away and contribute. So that's my roundabout answer to it, is if they move him, they need to get value back immediately. They can't afford to just get a pick back and wait for a year. That being said, I'll throw out one name, and this is kind of grasping at straws. I thought D'Angelo Ross has been really solid in training camp for the last 2 years, and he keeps getting hurt during camp, and he spent the last 2 years on IR. He was originally UDFA. He's a little bit smaller. He might be more of a slot cornerback, but he played on the outside in college. He's worked a little bit on the outside in the brief times we've seen him. So I've always liked him. So maybe there's something there. But yeah, it's pretty tough. At that point, not at that point, even still, I'd like to see them go out and get a guy like a Dre Kirkpatrick or some sort of veteran corner who, it doesn't mean you're not giving Juwan Williams a chance. It doesn't mean you're not giving Michael Jackson a chance. It doesn't mean you're not giving D'Angelo Ross a chance, Jalen Mills, whoever. It's just, if you have a veteran who you at least know can be decent at the spot, then at least you have something to fall back on. That's my biggest worries. If Gilmore leaves now, they have no safe option. I'd at least like to see them bring in, doesn't have to be flashy, high upside guy, but have some sort of safe option behind Gilmore and Jackson.
I sort of feel like they think their safe option is Jalen Mills, because what I was told, the reason why Jason McCourty didn't resign here with New England and decided to go down to Miami is because he didn't have a role here. Right. He didn't have playing time here. And to me, the reason why he didn't have playing time here is because they signed Jalen Mills. And I sort of feel like they think that Jalen Mills is kind of that corner safety hybrid type of player where they can play him a little bit at both positions and sort of do what Jason McCourty was doing in 2020. But Jason McCourty is a pure outside corner by trade. Right. And he played a little bit in the slot at times throughout his career, too. But he's a pure corner by trade. He is not a safety. Right. Jalen Mills has in-game experience at both spots. So I think that they thought he's a younger player, Jalen Mills, and he's someone that's a little bit more experienced at both corner and safety. So we have a little bit more versatility there with that guy. So I think their fallback plan is Jalen Mills. I have actually liked what I've seen at times out of Michael Jackson. I don't want to overreact too much to these types of practices, but he had pretty good coverage on Nelson Aguilar today on a deep ball that I think it was Cam had to sail deep over Aguilar's head because the coverage was really tight. So I think Michael Jackson has had his moments. I definitely wouldn't feel good or be confident in him being a starting cornerback for you to start the season. But to me, it definitely feels like we're trending, if Gilmore's not here, we're trending towards JC Jackson and Jalen Mills being your outside corners. And Jalen Mills, like I said, when he was in Philadelphia, was one of the worst starting outside cornerbacks in the NFL until they moved him to safety. So maybe the Patriots can fix him. A lot of his issues, especially in press man coverage, were with impatience and early opening of his hips, right? Every single time a receiver gave him a route release with a fake or a double move or something, he was biting on first move every single time. It's kind of like a base stealer when the pitcher starts his motion and he just goes and they pick him off, right? That was kind of what was happening with Jalen Mills, was every single time somebody moved and they faked the outside, right? Jalen Mills would step with him to the outside and open up the inside, and it was really easy to counter Jalen Mills's movements. So maybe they feel like they can fix that. Michael Jackson, I think, is a longer corner and somebody that can maybe stay a little bit more glued to vertical routes because of his a little bit more patience, but overall, I don't feel great about that combination. I did want to circle back to the offense. Now we've talked a lot about the Stephon Gilmore situation. I think we're both in the camp, just to wrap this up, that to do not anything, but I would be in the camp at least to do what you got to do to get him back in here for 2021. I'm not saying to overpay him on a big time contract extension, but I think having Stephon Gilmore on the team this season makes the Patriots the best possible team that they would be in 2021.
It completely changes the dynamic of the defense. It does. I think it's not just, it makes them, it's easy to say that they're a better team with him. They're a different team with him. It completely changes the complexion of everything.
All right, let's move back over to the offensive side of the ball for a second. So we did see the starting, along with Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry out there at times, we did see the starting offensive line for the first time as well. And Isaiah Wynn returned at left tackle, Trent Brown at right tackle, Onwenu at left guard. That was sort of the group, and that line, just seeing that on paper was good to see it out on the field together. I also wanted to touch briefly on N'Keal Harry, but obviously it's not a major surprise in terms of the lineup, but it was good to see the line together for the first time with Isaiah Wynn being at practice, not at the voluntary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a unit that I think everybody's really excited about. I think that they should be, again, one of the best in football, and it's just different to see it, especially, and I know he was at one of the OTA practices, it might have been two, but Trent Brown is massive. It's unreal. Yeah. Just towering over the rest of the offensive line. It's like, when you see a skyline and all the buildings are tall, but then one of them's just like, yeah, it's unbelievable. It provides so many unique opportunities for the offense. So it's really struck me just kind of and even when they're in half speed, just seeing how they can operate differently when he's in the lineup. It really struck me. I think we may have even underestimated a little bit when they made that trade, what it means for them to have Trent Brown back.
I also think what it means for Trent Brown, right? Because I know Dante Scarnecchia is not here anymore, but it does sort of feel like to me that this is where Trent Brown kind of belongs, because they know how to motivate him and they know how to get the best out of him. So it wouldn't shock me at all if the Patriots reach a long-term extension with Trent Brown at some point and keep him here for a couple of years, because whether he plays on the left side or the right side, regardless of where he's at necessarily, it's where he's happy, it's where they're happy, you know what I mean? And he's talked about that. He's talked about how he just didn't feel like himself with the Raiders, and it just didn't feel like a great fit for him. But here is sort of where he feels better and sort of like where he belongs. So I wouldn't be surprised if Trent Brown's around for a little bit. I did want to point out that N'Keal Harry, I talked to one of his trainers. He has had an emphasis on slimming down. I thought he looked skinnier just from the naked eye, just looking at him out at practice.
He does, yeah.
I don't know if it's going to mean anything. These are sort of those off-season tropes of, he's in the best shape of his life or whatever. But he's no longer trying to be that big body, 225, 230-pound guy. He's probably closer to 210 pounds at this point, and he looks slimmer and maybe a little bit lighter on his feet. I don't know if it will translate. Only time will tell. But did you see anything from Harry, whether it's this practice or the couple other practices, that you made you excited at all?
I didn't see anything that made me unexcited. I don't know that he's popped. I don't know that I've been like, oh, N'Keal Harry, that was awesome. But I don't think I've seen him screw up either. He's a big guy who wins physically. We're not really going to see the highlight stuff from N'Keal till the pads come on. Yeah. So I know that's a boring answer. I know that's not what anybody wants to hear, but I'm not going to, sit here and make stuff up. So
no, really hasn't been anything flashy.
Right. He's and you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. Some people think he needs to pop to hold on to his roster spot, and there might be some truth to that, but the best way to make the team in a position like his is just not screw up. And I really haven't seen him screw up much, if at all. So that's the big thing. We'll see if he pops once the pads come on, but it looks like he's doing much as he can at this point, which is encouraging.
I guess, yeah. I mean, look, I'm done hyping N'Keal Harry because I hyped him enough and it hasn't worked out for me. So now I'm going to go the other way. And if I'm wrong and he reverses it, then great. You know what I mean? I don't know. I haven't seen anything out of N'Keal Harry that's particularly impressive, other than the fact that he looks like he's in great shape. And take that for what it's worth. And it's a June storyline for sure. And I guess we'll see if any of it can translate into actual football, right? And that's what I said on Twitter. He's slimmed down. We'll see if it actually will translate into actual football. But I do find it interesting that instead of bulking up and like everybody's like talking about converting N'Keal Harry to tight end and stuff like that, instead of going that direction, he's gone the other direction, right? And he's slimmed down instead of bulking up. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not getting too excited by any means. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you had that you thought stood out today. There's a couple of players I think we could discuss sort of towards the back end of the roster, maybe that are kind of putting themselves in position to battle it out in camp. But is there anything big that I missed that you thought was interesting today?
I thought the defense looked really good again. I am just blown away by Henry Anderson. I think, and it's tough to tell without the pads. That's the caveat on all of this. But, those are guys who normally struggle without the pads. In the way he just gets off the ball, his reaction time from the snap to getting out of his stance, he's putting good linemen and he's getting onto them and putting them on their back foot.
Yeah.
So I've been very impressed with him. I thought Kyle Van Noy had a good day. I thought Josh Uche had another great day. And he is, again, the pads, of course, but he
is. We just keep repeating it.
Right. The pads got to come on, right? But
we need the pads.
He's flying all over the place. He's flying around, and it's a competitive spot. I'll add, somebody did mention the comments with Chase Winovich. He wasn't there today. Bill Belichick did say this morning there were some travel logistic issues. I don't know what that means. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I think we can save Winovich for tomorrow if he's not there again, because if he's skipping, there are some implications there. But I'll give him the day for the benefit of the doubt. But
he has been at OTAs for what it's worth.
So
right?
that's I don't want to dig into that right now until we have a clear picture. But even without him, defensive front looks real good, freaking good.
I was actually pretty surprised at how involved Montravius Adams has been as well, and he's somebody that I thought maybe that could be a player that they could find that could sort of take over some of the things that Adam Butler did until Christian Barmore is ready to take on a full-time role. So maybe Montravius Adams factors in early on in the season or for the first year of Christian Barmore's career, and they kind of see what they have with that. I feel bad for Will Sherman, the rookie offensive lineman, because Josh Uche just burns him every single time those two are
he's still learning. He's still learning.
I just feel bad for him because he can't block Uche to save his life. And Uche is just shot out of cannon. Even when they're not really going full speed, Uche's just his half speed explosiveness is fast, right? Like even his sort of a glorified walkthrough speed is fast. So he's been great just all spring, really. He's been really, really good. Isaiah Zuber continues to do some things. He didn't catch any passes, I don't think, today in team drills. At least I didn't catch him with any. But he continues to look the part to me of an NFL wide receiver. Again, we'll see what that means once it comes down to cuts and things like that. But I do think, like I've been saying, that his versatility to be able to do a bunch of different things in terms of the kick return game and carry the football on offense, that's a role, right? Return kickoffs. Right. Take end arounds and jet sweeps, run some vertical routes like that. That's a role that you can carve out in the offense on the team if you're Isaiah Zuber, even if you're not, in the top three, so to speak, and you're not one of their go-to receivers.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because my big takeaway from Zuber, and there's two guys, and we'll get to the other one. I wrote about this today for 985sportshub.com. It's in my notebook. Two guys who I think have just been really solid in camp, and success at this time of year doesn't necessarily mean you're making big plays. It just means you're doing what you need to do. Zuber looks like a much more well-rounded receiver to me than he did last year.
Yeah, definitely. His routes are a lot crisper than they were last year. I mean, he looks, I hate to say it, but he looks better than N'Keal Harry at these practices.
Wouldn't necessarily disagree. And it's,
it's two different things, right? It's kind of apples to oranges.
Right. It's non-padded non-contact practices with a physical receiver versus speed receiver. So in some ways you'd almost expect Zuber to look better, but he had all the gadget stuff last year, but he really looks like he's rounding out as a receiver. And I think he can compete for a spot. And then, I don't know if you had any more Zuber thoughts or if you want to get on to if I can get into the other player who I like.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other guy I like, and it's kind of the same thing where he's not like making superstar plays, but he's just, been a solid player. And that's Adrian Colbert. The safety he was the first player on the field today by 5 minutes. And he's had a couple of nice pass breakups, but he just seems to be in position. in the right spot more often than not, and they need another deep safety behind Devin. I don't know that is there really another safety on the roster who has experience playing primarily deep instead of in the box. Colbert can do that, but he's still going to play the physical brand they want from their safeties, and he can play special teams. So I think that, given all the different things he can do, and he can do some things that other guys on the roster aren't as experienced with, given all of that, if he just has a decent camp, he's going to sneak his way onto the back end of the roster. So two guys I'm looking at, Zuber and Colbert, who I just, they're doing what they need to do in minicamp. And sometimes that can get you on the roster. You don't need to go above and beyond. You just do what you need to do, and you have a unique skill set. It's how Gunner made the team. Right. And I think that those are two guys who are doing that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. It's just this time of year with training camp, and Bill Belichick always talks about this, right, this is the setup to training camp, right? These mini camps, these OTA practices, they're basic install, they're teaching things, they're educating the players on the system and on the playbook. So that way once we get to July and August, that's when you can start to compete for roster spots. And guys like Colbert, guys like Zuber, guys like in other veins, kind of like a JJ Taylor who's setting himself up for maybe more snaps, although Brandon Bolden came back to practice today and looked terrific. Yeah, catching the football out of the backfield.
He's in really good shape too. Yeah, I think in a good way. In a good way. I think he lost like 20, 25 pounds.
He was has a new number, which confused me at first, right?
Well, so not only does he have a new number, the guy wearing 38 now, D Virgin, plays a ton of special teams, and he has the dreadlocks. Yeah. So I keep having to mentally correct that. Yeah. Yeah.
So 25 is now Brandon Bolden. So that confused me. I'm seeing him catch these passes out of the backfield, and I'm like, is that like Ramondre Stevenson? Like who am I watching here? Right. And it's Brandon Bolden. So he looks really good. So, but back to guys like Zuber, guys.
Wait, can I throw in real quick in case people don't know? Because this is very cool. Quick little thing people should know. Brandon Bolden, why he switched to 25. Evan, I don't know if you've seen this.
I think I did, but
so his grandfather, Frank Pitts, played for the Chiefs way back when. He played in the first Super Bowl, and he wore 25. So, and Bolden posted something about it on social media. He wanted his grandfather to see him wearing his old number. So just very cool. I just wanted to.
Yeah, I thought Brandon Bolden looked fantastic. Yeah, pretty, comes back from the opt-out and looks maybe better than he did before. Maybe that year off kind of freshened up his body a little bit or something like that. I don't know. I thought he looked fantastic. But my point about just kind of these back end of the roster guys like Zuber, like an Adrian Colbert, is that right now they're just laying the foundation to allow themselves to compete. But what they've done is they've put themselves in a position to even be in these conversations, right? Like, I don't know if we're talking about Isaiah Zuber. If he doesn't have a good spring, we're just not going to talk about him, right? We're not going to talk about Adrian Colbert unless he has a strong spring. So these guys are all putting themselves in position to compete. So that's cool to hear. Brandon Bolden looks fantastic. Mac Jones thought looked a lot better than he has in the last couple practices. Stephon Gilmore contract situation, we discussed that as well earlier in the show. So if you want to rewind and listen to our opinions on all of that, Alex, leave me with, I like this one question that we got, and I guess we sort of just did this, but besides Adrian Colbert, your guy, Jane Doe, who we don't know who that is, but I'm going to pull up this one question. And there's always that signing that nobody expects to make it, but makes the roster. Who could that be? Besides Adrian Colbert, you're not allowed to say him.
Yeah, see, so that's my guy for that. You go first. Anything about this for a second?
Okay, well, I guess I don't know. This time, I don't know if Michael Jackson Sr. really qualifies for this sort of designation, but I guess it depends on if Stephon Gilmore is in the camp or not.
I think he qualifies. I mean, it was a year ago, but a guy they trade a conditional 7th round pick for, I would say fits in this.
Yeah, so I think Michael Jackson Sr. has got a chance to make the team. We've talked about the outside cornerback depth before. I've seen at least enough out of him to be optimistic that maybe they found something with him as a depth piece. I'm not sitting here saying that they're going to start him or he should be starting, but as a depth piece, I think he's pushing Juwan Williams. That's for sure. If I'm Juwan Williams right now, I come out of this mini camp and out of this spring practice kind of circuit here thinking I need to step it up, right? Like some of these guys are outplaying me. I really need to step it up. So I think Michael Jackson Sr. would be mine.
So, okay, I'll give you, I like Colbert. I'll give you one more. And it's tough because the position's just so deep. and I think he's going to play well enough to make the team, but I don't know what the depth. Raekwon McMillan.
Yeah.
Right. I've been a big fan of his since they signed him. He was like one of the first. He was in that first week. He got buried in there, but was a 100-tackle guy as a rookie, second-round pick out of Ohio State.
Really good potential coming out of Ohio State.
Yeah, I really liked him coming out of college. He had some injury problems the last couple of years, but he can play middle linebacker. He can play sideline to sideline, which outside of Donta Hightower and Terez Hall, Juwan Bentley's not a sideline to sideline guy, right? I don't know that he's giving you that. Cameron, McGrone isn't good, probably isn't going to play this year. So they're going to need a mobile inside linebacker, and he's a great special teams player as well. McMillan is. So, if Bentley kind of slips up a little bit and they can maybe get something of value for him, trade him in the last year of his deal, or not, or maybe McMillan plays well enough where they feel like they have to keep a bunch of linebackers, and maybe they keep one less defensive lineman. Maybe they keep one less offensive lineman, whatever it is. I really like Raekwon McMillan to have a strong camp and make a run at the roster.
I would also say that every single year, and you make fun of me for Maurice Harris, every single year we fall in love with somebody at this time of the year that completely disappears once the pads go on and training camp actually starts, and that we find out that it's actually this other guy that we should have been hyping all along. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. So maybe Raekwon McMillan's one of those guys who hasn't necessarily popped at any of these practices, but once we get the pads on, maybe it's a different story.
So you made me think of one other one. Quinn Nordin. Bob Stocy.
When you say something about the kickers, my ears perk up a little bit.
So Bob Stocy wrote something very interesting on him, on like his whole background. Really, it's fascinating. Go read it. 985thesportsup.com. But it's nothing against Nick Folk. I think Nick Folk was great, but kicker's a very fickle position. You can have it one year and be gone the next. Nordin has an unbelievable leg. As strong of a leg as, I've really ever seen. Accuracy is an issue with him, but, what Bob got from his coaches, his personal coaches, his coaches at Michigan, I think those accuracy issues might be more mental than physical. I know that scares some people, but that's actually the better way to do it, because if those issues were physical, you have to change his motion, which means maybe he doesn't hit the ball as hard. Maybe he doesn't still have that range. If it's just a matter of him learning to control himself a little more, then and he can get, he was, I think, 74% as a senior in college, and that you can't have that. But if he can get into the low 80s, where he looks like a guy who can hit 60-yard field goals, you're talking about a guy who's maybe worth taking the gamble on. So we're a ways out. I need to see a lot more of him. I need to see him in a game against an active kick block team. Hopefully we see that in the preseason. But hearing from his coaches, and I know that that's obviously his side, but hearing from his coaches and what Bob Stocy wrote, very, very interesting. Quinn Nordin. I'm going to keep a little bit of a closer eye on him now.
Yeah, we talked about him a little bit last week, and with Nordin, it's kind of like with Jake Bailey his rookie year, when you come in, you're like, wow, the ball just like sounds different coming off this guy's foot.
By the way, Jake Bailey had a 5.11 hang time.
Yeah, Jake Bailey's nails. Guy's unbelievable.
Waterlogged
rolls out of better than Nick's all-pro teams as a punter. Yeah, so with Jake Bailey his rookie year, I just remember coming out to OTAs and being like, wow, this guy's leg is just unreal, right? Just unreal. And you could just hear the pop in the ball and see how high the ball was in the air when he hit it, and just everything about it was just like, holy crap. With Quinn Nordin, I sort of get that as well, right? Like where I'm just like, wow, this guy's got a huge leg. And if they can refine the other things, then so be it.
So the difference is with Bailey, it wasn't just the power, his ball control, the way he could put spin on the ball, the way he could get it
Matthew
to die.
Slater, like the first practice they're out there in the spring, Matthew Slater's like laughing at how good Jake Bailey is.
He knew what was about to happen. Yeah. So I don't know that like that's the Bailey had the power, but he had that secondary trait. I don't know. And kicker, like punters can have a secondary trait. Kickers is just power and accuracy, and then I guess clutch, but you don't know that until you know it. You can't practice that. But it's Ken Nordin. It's the accuracy has to develop, and I can't project that. I can't say I think it will because this, or I think it won't because that. You just have to see whether or not it happens. It's tricky. So we'll see. But again, what Bob Stocy wrote, 985thesportshub.com about Nordin, really interesting. Also, he made his visit, or he was working out of Florida the same day that Adam Vinatieri's son went for his official visit. So conspiracy theory, Bill's just going to string the kicker thing along a year at a time until he can draft Vinatieri's kid. Because I don't know. Has an NFL coach ever coached a father and a son? That seems like the kind of thing Bill would be interested in.
Who coached Antoine Winfield? Because then maybe Antoine Winfield Jr. could I don't know if Bruce Arians.
It wasn't Bruce Arians. Yeah,
no, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's
maybe there's like a positional coach.
The only one that I can think of that could. Tyler Frabl's in the league now, right? So Bill could technically get his hand on Tyler Frable and have coached Mike Frable and Tyler Frable. They missed the opportunity on Asante Samuel Jr. I don't know if they wanted the opportunity on Asante Samuel.
I got to find that out because I was thinking about that when I read Bob's thing.
Yeah.
I got to get the answer on that. I got to know because doesn't that seem like the kind of thing that Bill would want on his resume?
Just even if it doesn't work out, just to have that little headline.
Just have him in camp. Just have him in camp so you can say you did it. And what better? Well, the other thing is, like you mentioned, Vrabel would be cool. What better way to do it than Vinatieri, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Too. So, I also just want to see them sign Tyler Frable and turn him into a great player just to stick it to Mike Vrabel. Like, I don't want to stick it to Mike. I love Mike Vrabel in terms of his Patriots.
What position does Tyler Vrabel play?
He's a tackle.
Oh, okay, I didn't even think you know that. Okay,
yeah,
right, good job.
So no, I think it's exciting that I like that idea because Mike Vrabel likes to bust Bill's chops all the time, so I think that would be fun. Yeah, Patrick Surtain Sr. and Jr. That's another possibility in the chat that could happen.
So this isn't NFL, but I think Nick Saban was the coach at Miami when Surtain was there, right?
Oh, so maybe they both played for. That would make sense why Junior committed to Alabama, right?
Well, he would also go to Alabama because he's really good in Alabama.
Yeah, that's fair. Too.
So he was with the Dolphins until 2004. I know we need to wrap this up.
No, I think Nick Saban was after 2004.
Nick Saban was 2005. Just
yeah,
by a year.
Nick Saban was the Drew Brees thing, right? He opted for Dante Culpepper over Drew Brees.
No, I knew he was I knew he was 2005. I didn't know Surtain lasted one more year.
Oh, that was close. All right, well, it's a possibility.
If anybody knows of an NFL coach or even college NFL, if anybody knows of a head coach who head coached a father and son, tweet it at us because I really want to know.
Yeah, you can tweet it at us, and you can also see us tomorrow night, roughly the same time, same place, another Patriots Beat podcast following day 2 of Patriots mandatory minicamp. It's supposed to rain again, Alex, which is not great. I did not enjoy sitting out there in the rain this morning. So it's supposed to rain again. So that hopefully the rain holds off though, because I actually think we learn more when it's not wet and sloppy. Although maybe I guess Bill would say you learn more about their mental toughness and stuff like that in terms of all that and how they handle the weather conditions. But I'd like to see a dry practice just to see the quarterbacks and receivers not have as much time with the football and handling the football. But until tomorrow night, we'll be back on Tuesday night to break down day 2 of Patriots minicamp. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight, guys, and we'll see you then.